Dr. Amanda Sullivan stood before the towering holographic display, her reflection ghosting across real-time battle statistics as they cascaded down the curved screen. Behind her, 20 of the world's finest strategic minds sat at their stations, their fingers dancing across neural interfaces with practiced precision. The air hummed with the sound of quantum processors processing quintillions of calculations per second. "Push the AI harder," she commanded, her voice carrying the weight of authority earned through 1,000 victories. "It's holding back something in Sector 7. The classified facility, buried deep beneath the Nevada desert, had started as a DARPA project to test military simulation technology. Now, 5 years later, it had evolved into humanity's premier testing ground for strategic excellence. The room's occupants were an unlikely coalition: former Special Forces operators, chess grandmasters, professional gamers, and strategic prodigies, all united under Amanda's leadership. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, ex-Navy SEAL and current master of asymmetric warfare simulations, noticed it first. The AI shifting its resource distribution. Pattern doesn't match any known strategy in the database. Amanda allowed herself a small smile. This was what they'd been waiting for. True machine creativity. The artificial intelligence they competed against had evolved beyond its original programming, developing strategies that should have been unbeatable. Should have been. "How many times has it tried this particular gambit?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "First time," Marcus replied, his fingers never stopping their intricate dance across his interface. "It's beautiful, actually. Creating a perfect resource trap by sacrificing 30% of its fleet to draw us into what looks like an obvious weakness." Around the room, other team members nodded in appreciation. They'd seen similar strategies before, but this one was different, more elegant, more subtle. The AI had learned from its previous defeats, crafting something entirely new. "Jessica, deploy the Broken Arrow protocol," Amanda ordered. "Marcus, prepare to execute a Fisheran defense, but hold until my mark." Jessica Thompson, former professional StarCraft player turned military strategist, raised an eyebrow. "Both. That's going to cost us 40% of our forces before we even engage." "Trust me," Amanda said, her eyes fixed on a particular data stream that only she seemed to notice. "The AI thinks it's created a perfect trap. Let's show it why perfection is overrated." The next 3 minutes were a symphony of controlled chaos. The AI's forces, a sophisticated simulation of future warfare technology, pressed their advantage exactly as Amanda had predicted. Her team executed their seemingly suicidal strategy with precision born of absolute trust in their commander. To an outside observer, it would have appeared that humanity's finest were walking into the most obvious trap imaginable. The AI had crafted a masterful strategy, using advanced game theory to create a scenario with no viable escape routes. But Amanda had learned long ago that the most dangerous assumption in strategy was believing that all players would make rational choices. "Now," she commanded, and her team moved as one. The Broken Arrow protocol scattered their forces in what appeared to be a panicked retreat. The Fisheran defense, named after a particularly unconventional chess grandmaster, committed their remaining forces to a strategy that any logical analysis would deem catastrophic. The AI's perfect trap collapsed. In its drive for strategic perfection, the artificial intelligence had overlooked humanity's greatest strength, their ability to recognize when breaking the rules was the only way to win. The scattered forces reformed in an impossible pattern, turning the AI's own tactical assumptions against it. Within seconds, victory was assured. As the simulation ended, Amanda allowed herself a moment of pride. Her team had done more than win. They'd proven once again that humanity's greatest advantage wasn't in creating perfect strategies, but in knowing when and how to shatter them. "Well done, everyone," she said, already preparing for the next challenge. "Log the AI's new strategy and prepare for another round. Let's see what else it can teach us about breaking perfection." None of them noticed the quantum fluctuation in their systems, a tiny irregularity that suggested someone, or something, had been watching their victory with great interest. The celebration in the facility's break room was subdued. Victory had become routine for Amanda's team. Jessica Thompson was demonstrating her winning move to a group of junior analysts using sugar packets as spacecraft when every screen in the facility flickered simultaneously. Amanda's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "Status report," she barked, already moving toward the main control room. Their quantum-encrypted systems were supposedly unhackable, supposedly being the operative word. "Multiple breaches across all security layers," Marcus called out, his fingers flying across 3 keyboards at once. "But this doesn't make sense. They're not attacking our defenses. They're ignoring them completely, like they don't even exist." The main display erupted in cascading symbols that reminded Amanda of mathematical equations having a seizure. The patterns shifted and flowed, eventually resolving into English text that somehow seemed to hover both on and beneath the screen surface. "Greetings, RCAITCTs of imperfection." Amanda felt the hair on the back of her neck rise. The message continued to form. "Your species progresses in strategic simulation has been noted and evaluated. The Galactic Competitive Federation extends an invitation to participate in real competition." Jessica let out a sharp laugh. "Is this some kind of joke? Did R&D cook this up to test our security?" "No," Marcus said, his voice unusually tight. "These quantum state manipulations, they're operating on principles we haven't even theorized yet. This is way beyond our tech level." The text shifted again. "Your SKEPTISISFM is expected and AP propriety. Please, ACCPT this simul demonstration of our authenticity." The air in the center of the room began to fold. There was no other way to describe it. Reality itself creased along invisible lines, forming an object that hurt to look at directly. It was a cube that seemed to exist in more dimensions than should be possible, its surfaces reflecting light that hadn't been cast. As the humans say, a new voice emerged from everywhere and nowhere at once, its tone carrying an edge of amusement. "We come in peace." Amanda stepped forward, positioning herself between the impossible object and her team. "I'm Dr. Amanda Sullivan, director of this facility. You've gone to considerable trouble to get our attention." Indeed, the voice now seemed to emanate from the cube. "We have been observing your species' remarkable progress in strategic simulation. Your recent victory was particularly interesting. Most species take millennia to develop the cognitive flexibility to intentionally employ imperfect strategies. You've been watching our simulations." Amanda's mind raced through the implications. "For how long?" "Long enough to be intrigued. Your species has achieved something unique. Mastery through deliberate imperfection. The Federation believes you may be ready for real competition." Marcus stood beside Amanda, his military training evident in his stance. "What kind of competition are we talking about?" The cube rippled, projecting images of what appeared to be massive arenas floating in space. "The grand game has been the crucible of civilization. For over 50,000 of your years, species compete in challenges of strategy, testing their mastery of physics, tactics, and reality itself." "And you want us to compete?" Amanda asked, noting how the alien's tone shifted between respect and something that sounded dangerously like condescension. "Want? No. We are offering you the opportunity to prove that your achievements are more than simple digital approximations. Unless, of course, you fear testing your strategies against real stakes." Amanda felt her team's eyes on her. The smart play would be to refuse. They were being baited, obviously. But she couldn't shake the feeling that this was exactly the kind of opportunity humanity had been unconsciously preparing for. "Before we accept," she said carefully, "I want to know the stakes." The cube pulsed with what might have been approval or amusement. "The usual terms apply. Victory brings advancement. access to technologies and knowledge beyond your current understanding. Defeat merely brings enlightenment about one's limitations. Amanda looked at her team, seeing the same mix of caution and excitement she felt. They had mastered every simulation Earth could create. But this was reality reaching back, offering them a chance to prove that humanity's unconventional approaches could work on a galactic stage. When do we start? The arena wasn't anything like Amanda had imagined. There was no grand coliseum, no cheering crowds, just a vast chamber that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions, its walls shifting between colors that shouldn't exist. Your first challenge begins in 30 microspans, announced their alien guide, a being that called itself XOR 7 and appeared as a constantly shifting constellation of light points. We've selected something appropriate for beginners. Marcus caught Amanda's eye, his usual confidence wavering. Their journey here had been disorienting enough. Traveling through what the Federation called simplified space had left half the team vomiting and the other half questioning their grip on reality. Ready positions, Amanda ordered, watching her team take their places at control interfaces that were unsettlingly similar to their simulation stations back on Earth. At least that felt familiar. The first hint that something was terribly wrong came when Jessica tried to deploy their standard opening formation. Command rejected, she reported, confusion evident in her voice. The units aren't responding to standard physics protocols. Before Amanda could respond, the chamber erupted with activity. Their opponents, a species that looked like crystalline octopi, had launched their first attack. The battlefield, if you could call it that, warped and twisted. What the hell? Marcus shouted. Their weapons are. They're firing backwards through time. Amanda watched in horror as their carefully positioned defensive line was destroyed before they had even finished deploying it. The temporal weapons didn't just hit their targets, they erased them from existence, creating paradoxical knots in causality that made her head spin. From observation galleries that seemed to fold through impossible dimensions, other alien species watched. Their reactions ranged from amused chittering to what sounded disturbingly like laughter. Standard Earth tactics detected, one of the crystalline opponents announced, its voice resonating through crystalline harmonics. Predictable three-dimensional thinking. Shall we show them why spatial geometry matters? The battlefield transformed. What had been a relatively straightforward three-dimensional space twisted into something that made Amanda's best mathematicians clutch their heads in pain. Their forces, still operating on human understanding of physics, found themselves trapped in geometric configurations that shouldn't have been possible. Pull back, Amanda ordered, desperately trying to find some pattern in the chaos. Regroup and... She never finished the command. The crystalline beings had done something to the very concept of back, turning retreat into advance into retreat again, creating a Mobius strip of tactical disaster. Perhaps, Tor 7 suggested, its tone dripping with false sympathy, you should stick to your digital playthings. The slaughter, there was no other word for it, continued for another 3 minutes. Every strategy they had mastered, every technique they had perfected in simulation, crumbled against the reality of advanced alien warfare. Stop, Amanda finally called out, her voice tight with controlled frustration. We yield this round. The battlefield dissolved, leaving her team shaken and pale. The crystalline beings shifted into what might have been a victory formation, their facets reflecting satisfaction. An admirable first attempt, Tor 7 offered. Most new species last only seconds against temporal warfare. You managed almost 4 minutes. Amanda stared at the aftermath displayed on their monitors, her mind racing. They had been arrogant, assuming their mastery of Earth's physics would translate to this new arena. But there was something else, something in the way their units had failed. Another round, she demanded, ignoring the shocked looks from her team. Are you certain? Tor 7's points of light swirled in what might have been concern. Most species take several solar cycles to recover from their first exposure to multidimensional combat. Amanda looked at her team, seeing past their defeat to the rapid calculations happening behind their eyes. They weren't broken. They were learning, adapting, even if they didn't realize it yet. Another round, she repeated, firmer this time. And this time, we're not going to play by Earth's rules. The alien observation galleries erupted in a new round of chittering. They thought they were watching humanity's hubris. They didn't understand they were witnessing something far more dangerous. Humans learning to fail in entirely new ways. 6 hours and 23 crushing defeats later, Amanda stood in their assigned preparation chamber, watching her team through bleary eyes. They should have been demoralized. Instead, she noticed something extraordinary. "Run that last failure by me again," Jessica said to Marcus, her fingers sketching impossible geometries in the air. Right before our units got temporal locked, they exhibited a weird quantum state. Marcus nodded, his tactical display recreating their most recent disaster. "See how the temporal weapons created those causality knots? But look here." He froze the replay. Our third squadron technically existed in 3 time states simultaneously before they were erased. "That shouldn't be possible," Amanda interjected, moving closer. Unless we're thinking about time wrong," Jessica finished. "We keep trying to avoid temporal weapons, but what if we could use the causality knots to our advantage?" From the corner, Dr. James Rivera, their quantum physics expert who had been silent for hours, suddenly looked up from his calculations. "They're not using time as a weapon," he said, eyes wide. "They're using weapons that happen to affect time. There's a difference." Amanda felt a familiar tingle at the base of her skull, the same sensation she got right before a major breakthrough. Looking around the room, she saw the same intense focus she remembered from their earliest simulation days. Her team wasn't following any established protocol anymore. They were innovating, experimenting, failing in new and increasingly interesting ways. Their next match started before they could fully develop their theory. Their opponents this time were the Martian, a species that looked like sentient gas clouds and specialized in probability manipulation. Standard human formation detected, the Martian commander announced with the now familiar tone of dismissal, initiating probability cascade. But this time, Amanda was watching for something specific. As their forces began to fall apart under the Martians' attack, she tracked not their failures, but the speed at which they adapted to each new disaster. Section 3. Intentionally fail your next maneuver, she ordered, earning confused looks from her team. "Trust me. Fail as spectacularly as you can." The resulting chaos was magnificent. Their units spun out of control, creating a pattern of failure so complex that it actually disrupted the Martians' probability calculations. In the observation gallery, Tor 7's points of light rearranged in what might have been confusion. "Interesting," the alien mused. "Your forces are performing well below their theoretical capabilities, yet they're achieving unexpected results." Amanda allowed herself a small smile. "Jessica, remember that temporal knot theory. Test it. Now." The next few minutes were a symphony of deliberate disasters. Each failure taught them something new about how reality worked at this level of combat. They still lost, but this time the Martian victory took nearly twice as long to achieve. After the match, Amanda gathered her team close, speaking in hushed tones. "Did anyone else notice? While the Martian were calculating their perfect probability matrices, we tried and failed at 6 different strategies." Marcus's eyes widened. "They're too perfect," he whispered. "All these species, they've evolved with this level of technology. They don't know how to fail productively." Amanda finished. "They spend so much time calculating the perfect move that they only try one approach at a time. We're failing faster than they can succeed." Around the room, she saw the realization dawn on her team's faces. Their greatest weakness, their inexperience with advanced technology, had forced them to develop their greatest strength, the ability to learn from failure at an unprecedented rate. "Next match is against the temporal crystals again," Jessica reported, a new confidence in her voice. They're probably expecting us to try and counter their time weapons. Amanda's smile grew wider. Then let's disappoint them. New strategy, everyone. We're going to fail so spectacularly that we break their understanding of what failure even means. In the observation gallery, the alien species continued to watch with amusement, not yet realizing that they were about to witness something unprecedented in the history of the grand game. Humans turning the art of failure into a weapon. Your strategy appears flawed, the crystalline commander announced as Amanda's forces scattered in seemingly random directions. Your units are violating basic tactical protocols. Are they? Amanda asked innocently, watching as her team executed what they dubbed the Chaos Gambit. Marcus, initiate failure sequence Delta. Their units plunged directly into the temporal weapons fire, but instead of trying to dodge, they embraced the causality knots. On the main display, probability curves twisted into impossible shapes. This is incorrect, one of the crystalline beings announced, its harmonics showing distinct signs of distress. Your forces are creating intentional paradoxes. Jessica suppressed a grin as she deliberately crashed two squadrons into each other, creating a cascade of temporal anomalies. Dr. Rivera, how's that quantum entanglement looking? Beautiful, Rivera replied, his displays showing patterns that would have given Einstein nightmares. Their temporal weapons are so focused on maintaining perfect causality that they don't know how to handle deliberate paradoxes. The observation galleries had gone silent. Where before there had been amused chittering, now there was only confused silence as humanity demonstrated their mastery of strategic disaster. Impossible, the crystalline commander declared as their perfect temporal grid began to unravel. You're violating every principle of tactical engagement. That's the idea, Amanda muttered, then louder. Now, Jessica. Their forces, already scattered across multiple timelines due to the temporal weapons, suddenly synchronized their failures. Each disaster was carefully calculated to compound the others, creating a wave of chaos that turned the crystalline being's perfect temporal manipulation against itself. Warning, the battlefield computers announced. Causality collapse imminent. The crystalline beings tried to retreat, but their weapons had created too many temporal knots. As they attempted to calculate the perfect escape vector, humanity's forces continued to fail in increasingly spectacular ways, each failure adding another layer of complexity to the paradox web. You must stop. Thor 7 called out, its points of light forming agitated patterns. This level of temporal disruption is unprecedented. Amanda leaned forward, her eyes locked on the battlefield display. Time isn't just a weapon, she announced. It's a playground. Rivera, show them what happens when you embrace chaos. Rivera initiated their final move, a maneuver they'd named Murphy's Revenge. Their remaining forces deliberately triggered every temporal weapon in range, creating a feedback loop of causality violations that turned the entire battlefield into one massive paradox. The crystalline beings, trapped by their own perfect protocols, could only watch as their carefully maintained temporal grid collapse. Their weapons, designed to create precise changes in time, couldn't handle the sheer volume of paradoxes humanity had generated. When the quantum dust settled, the impossible had happened. The human forces, while technically destroyed across multiple timelines, had achieved their objective. The crystalline being's perfect temporal control had been completely disrupted. Match concluded, the arena computer announced, sounding almost confused. Human victory by technical paradox. The observation galleries erupted in shocked discussions. No species had ever won by deliberately losing before. The very concept challenged thousands of years of tactical doctrine. Interesting approach, Kotor 7 admitted, floating closer to Amanda's command station. Though I must ask, how did you know this would work? Amanda smiled, remembering countless simulation failures back on Earth. We didn't, but we've learned that not knowing something is about to work is the first step to discovering why it should have never worked in the first place. An unusual philosophy, Sor 7 observed. Most species seek to minimize failures. That's their mistake. Marcus chimed in, already analyzing data from their victory. They never learn that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the laboratory where success is invented. As her team celebrated their first victory, Amanda noticed something else. The other competing species were watching them with new expressions. The amusement was gone, replaced by something that looked remarkably like concern. They had good reason to be worried. Humanity had just proven that their greatest weakness, their inexperience with advanced technology, had forced them to develop something far more dangerous, the ability to weaponize failure itself. And they were just getting started. The Federation's analysis chamber hummed with exotic energies as Amanda and her team reviewed their recent victories. Their successful exploitation of temporal paradoxes had opened doors, quite literally, as the Federation had granted them access to previously restricted areas of the facility. Display historical technological progression of competing species, Amanda commanded. The chamber's holographic systems responded, filling the air with evolutionary timelines of various civilizations. "I don't like this," Marcus muttered, studying the data streams. "Something's not adding up." Every other species followed almost identical development patterns. Jessica moved through the floating displays, her expression growing more troubled with each analysis. "Look at these timestamps. They all discovered faster than light travel within a few centuries of discovering electricity." "That's impossible," Rivera finished, his scientific training evident in his frown. "The technological gaps are too consistent. It's like they all followed the same guidebook." Amanda touched one of the displays, expanding the data on the crystalline beings. "They did," she said softly. "Every single species either had contact with advanced civilizations during their development or found their ruins," Marcus concluded. "Except us." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity's isolation, long considered their greatest disadvantage in the galaxy, had forced them to develop along a completely unique path. A subtle shift in the air announced Thor 7's arrival. "You've noticed the pattern," the entity observed, its points of light arranging into what they'd learned to recognize as a scholarly configuration. "It wasn't just about monitoring our progress, was it?" Amanda asked, turning to face their alien guide. "This whole competition, you're studying us because we're an anomaly." "Precisely." Thor 7's lights pulsed with what might have been excitement. Every other known spacefaring race developed with access to advanced technological foundations. They built upon existing knowledge, following proven paths to the stars. Rivera stepped forward, his eyes wide with realization. "That's why they can't handle our strategies. They've never had to deal with true technological blind spots." Indeed. Thor 7 expanded the historical displays, observed the Mercians' probability manipulation. They discovered it in ancient databases, the crystalline being's temporal technology, reverse-engineered from precursor artifacts. "While we had to figure everything out from scratch," Jessica said, a note of pride entering her voice. "Every failure, every dead end, was a lesson," Amanda finished. "We didn't just learn what worked, we learned why things failed. That knowledge is something you can't get from a manual or a database." The displays shifted, showing their recent victories. Their seemingly chaotic strategies took on new meaning as they watched them alongside the other species' reactions. "Your opponents cannot comprehend your methods," Thor 7 explained, "because they have never needed to understand why their technology works, only how to use it correctly. When you intentionally subvert these principles, we're not just breaking the rules," Marcus interrupted, excitement building in his voice. "We're breaking their fundamental assumptions about how rules work." Amanda studied the data with new eyes. Every failed strategy, every seemingly absurd tactic they'd employed, had forced their opponents to confront something they'd never experienced: genuine technological uncertainty. "The Federation is concerned," Thor 7 admitted, its light points shifting to a more formal pattern. "Your species represents an unprecedented variable. Your victories, while impressive, suggest a potentially destabilizing influence on established galactic order. Because we're proving that their perfect understanding isn't so perfect after all, Amanda said, understanding dawning. Every time we succeed by failing differently, we're showing them blind spots in their own knowledge. The chamber's displays flickered with new data, upcoming matches, each against species that had specifically requested to face the humans. But the tone had changed. These weren't challenges born of amusement or condescension anymore. They were testing humanity's ability to disrupt the very foundations of their technological society. The final round's approach. Tor-7 announced formally. The Federation's greatest strategists have requested personal matches. They believe your unique perspectives must be thoroughly evaluated. Amanda looked at her team, seeing the same determination reflected in their eyes. They weren't just competing anymore. They were demonstrating the power of true innovation, earned through millennia of isolated struggle and countless productive failures. Good, she said simply. It's time to show them what else we've learned from being wrong. The final arena was different. A vast cosmic amphitheater where the laws of physics themselves seemed to be written in floating alien script. Before them stood representatives from the 7 most advanced species in the Federation, each a master of their respective technological domains. The Coalition of Supreme Strategists welcomes humanity's champions, announced a being of pure energy contained within a geometric lattice. We shall now demonstrate proper mastery of universal laws. Amanda noticed how they positioned themselves: the temporal crystal masters, the probability shapers, the quantum manipulators, the dimensional folders, the entropy directors, the gravity sculptors, and the consciousness collective. Each had perfected their art over millennia. Ready? She asked her team quietly. Ready to fail spectacularly, Jessica confirmed, her fingers hovering over her controls with practiced confidence. Begin, the Coalition announced in unison. The battle that erupted defied conventional description. The Coalition's forces moved with perfect synchronization, each species' technology complementing the others in ways that should have been unstoppable. Temporal weapons synchronized with probability manipulation, while quantum states were folded through extra dimensions. But humanity had learned to dance in chaos. Execute Protocol 0, Amanda commanded. You can't be serious, Rivera protested. We only theorized that would work. The math isn't even complete. Exactly, Amanda smiled. Execute. Their forces began to move in ways that appeared completely random, but contained a deeper pattern, one based on their incomplete understanding of advanced physics. Where the Coalition forces expected perfect counter-moves, they encountered strategies born from partial knowledge and creative guesswork. Their formations are incorrect, the quantum manipulator announced, its voice riddled with confusion. They're violating fundamental laws off. Are we? Amanda interrupted. Or are we just approaching them from angles you never considered because you never had to? Marcus triggered a sequence that deliberately misused temporal technology, creating paradoxes that the crystalline beings rushed to correct, only to fall into carefully laid probability traps. Jessica's units exploited the gaps between dimensions that the folders considered too imperfect to use. Impossible, the consciousness collective declared. Your understanding is incomplete. Your methods are flawed. You cannot. Cannot what? Amanda challenged. Cannot succeed because we don't follow your perfect patterns. Watch us. Rivera initiated their masterstroke, a cascade of deliberately incorrect applications of advanced technology that forced the Coalition to respond with their proper techniques. But each correct response only fed into humanity's web of controlled chaos. You're not just breaking the rules. Tor-7 observed from the sidelines, its lights pulsing with what might have been awe. You're proving the rules themselves are incomplete. The Coalition's perfect formation began to unravel. Their coordinated attacks, based on millennia of established doctrine, couldn't adapt to humanity's seemingly random but meticulously planned failures. Each attempt to correct humanity's mistakes only created new opportunities for exploitation. Your forces are in disarray, the entropy director noted with increasing alarm. Yet you achieve results that our calculations deemed impossible. That's humanity's secret, Amanda replied, watching as her team's strategy came to fruition. We don't just think outside the box. We break it down and build something new from the pieces you thought were useless. The final moments of the battle were a symphony of controlled destruction. Humanity's forces, deliberately employing imperfect understanding of advanced technology, created situations that the Coalition's perfect mastery couldn't handle. Their very perfection became a weakness against humanity's adaptive chaos. When the quantum dust settled, the impossible had happened. The Coalition's forces were scattered, their perfect formations shattered by strategies they couldn't even properly classify as mistakes. Match concluded, the arena announced. Victory by unconventional optimization. The amphitheater fell silent. The Coalition members hovered in what appeared to be shocked contemplation. Millennia of technological perfection had just been defeated by a species that barely understood the tools they were using. This changes everything, the Consciousness Collective finally stated. The very foundations of our technological understanding need to be re-examined. Amanda finished, because there's something more powerful than perfect knowledge. And what is that? The Coalition asked in unison. Amanda looked at her team, each member wearing the same expression of fierce pride. The willingness to be wrong in new and interesting ways. After all, that's how humanity learned to fly. By failing at it until failure itself became impossible. The Federation's Grand Council chamber stretched beyond the limits of human perception, filled with representatives from every competing species. Amanda and her team stood at its center, their recent victory still sending shockwaves through the galactic community. We have reviewed humanity's performance in the grand game, announced the council speaker, a being composed of interwoven streams of data and light. Your methods have forced us to confront an uncomfortable truth. That perfection isn't all it's cracked up to be, Jessica suggested, earning a sharp look from Amanda, though she couldn't entirely hide her smile. That innovation requires more than just building upon established knowledge. The speaker corrected. We have spent millennia perfecting technologies discovered by our predecessors. But you? The being paused, its data streams shifting in what might have been admiration. You have shown us the power of imperfect understanding. Marcus stepped forward. With all due respect, it's not about imperfect understanding. It's about understanding imperfection itself. Explain, demanded one of the Coalition members from their earlier victory. Amanda nodded to Rivera, who projected their battle data into the chamber's holographic system. Look at your technological progression, he said, highlighting various points in their history. Each advancement was built on proven principles, refined to perfection over generations. As is proper, the crystalline beings harmonized. Is it? Amanda challenged. Because humanity had to rediscover every principle from scratch. We couldn't just build on existing knowledge. We had to understand why things failed before we could make them succeed. The chamber filled with murmurs as Rivera displayed humanity's development timeline alongside the others. Where alien civilization showed smooth, predictable progress, Earth's history was a chaotic web of failures, dead ends, and unexpected breakthroughs. Your victory was not merely tactical, Sor 7 observed, floating forward. It was philosophical. You demonstrated that true mastery comes not from avoiding failure, but from understanding it intimately. Exactly, Amanda agreed. Every time we failed in your games, we weren't just losing. We were learning things about your technology that you never needed to discover for yourselves. The council speaker's data streams pulsed with new patterns. You proposed that our perfect understanding is incomplete, Marcus finished, because you never had to understand why your technology could fail. You only learned how to use it correctly. Jessica pulled up recordings from their matches. Watch how we use temporal weapons incorrectly, she said. We didn't just make mistakes. We made exactly the right kind of mistakes to discover possibilities you'd never considered. Because you'd never needed to consider them, Rivera added. Your technology worked perfectly from the start. Ours, we had to fail our way to every single breakthrough. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't just won their matches. They'd demonstrated an entirely new approach to technological advancement. The Federation must adapt, the Council speaker finally declared. We propose an exchange. Humanity will teach us the art of productive failure. And in return, we will share our technological knowledge, not as perfect solutions, but as foundations for new innovations. Amanda looked at her team, seeing the same excitement in their eyes that had driven them through countless simulation failures back on Earth. We accept with one condition. Name it. Don't just give us your technology, she said. Let us fail at understanding it our way. Because that's how humanity learns best, by getting things wrong in exactly the right ways. The chamber erupted in what might have been laughter, but it was different from the condescending amusement they'd faced at the start. This was the sound of ancient civilizations realizing that perfection wasn't the end of progress. It was just the beginning. And so we come full circle, Tor 7 mused. You mastered Earth's simulations not by learning to win, but by learning to fail productively. Now you shall teach the galaxy to do the same. As the council chambers filled with discussion of new training programs and exchange initiatives, Amanda gathered her team close. Ready to fail on a galactic scale? She asked with a grin. Always, they responded in unison, already eager to start getting things wrong in all the most interesting ways. Because that, after all, was humanity's true simulation mastery, not the pursuit of perfection, but the art of turning failure itself into the most powerful force for progress the galaxy had ever seen.